Working through product discovery is by no means easy. Teams have to overcome a lot of uncertainty while staying on top of all the pieces of evidence they collect along the way. So, how can you bring structure to this chaos? My name is Tim Herbig and I work as a product management coach with companies all over Europe. And in this video, I will share with you what it takes to bring structure and clarity to your next product discovery. Before we get into discussing how to structure a product discovery, I want to spend a minute on defining what a product discovery actually is. Some attributes of a product discovery are the same no matter whether you're a startup or a corporate or whether you work in B2B or B2C. Let's take a look at a definition which has worked well for me over the last couple of years, working with a lot of companies across the range. At the very core, a product discovery is an iterative process which aims to reduce the uncertainty around a problem space or idea, so a product team can make sure that they are building the right product for the right audience. The most important part you need to pay attention to in this definition is that a product discovery is primarily about reducing uncertainty. Contrary to the belief in many companies, it's not just about fine-tuning an existing UI or chasing a predefined idea from the C-level. Instead, you want to stay focused on the problem space of a mission for as long as possible. Your goal should be to really understand the problem space and to get a sense for where that actually exists and what you can do to overcome it. So when it's time to structure your next product discovery, you don't want to start with the specific tactics you might want to put into your calendar or the ones of your team members. Instead, you want to get a sense of the various levels of product discovery activities and work your way through them. At the highest level, it's about the general, broad areas of a product discovery. And we're going to talk about those in more detail in a second. After that, it's time to look at the specific activities you could work your way through in order to achieve your goal of reducing uncertainty and finding answers around the problem space. And last but not least, you can then select tactics from your existing product discovery toolbox to decide which ones you actually want to pursue and put in your calendar. Most teams love to discuss shiny new feature ideas they have come across or which have been presented and shared by their bosses. What they don't realize though is that this leads them straight into the solution space. And while there's always a time and space for discussing the details of specific solutions, the beginning of a product discovery rarely is this time and place. Instead, as already mentioned, you want to start with the problem space. And even more important, when looking at your total time budget available to invest in product discovery, you want to make sure that the majority of your activities is centered around the problem space instead of chasing feature solutions. From a high-level perspective, a product discovery is typically set up around those 6 areas. You have alignment, research, ideation, prototype creation, validation, and refinement. The most important thing you need to keep in mind though is that even though those areas and those activities build up on each other and are somehow related, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to work your way through them in a linear way. More importantly, you want to think of them when you work through your product discovery mission. After identifying which of those product discovery activities might be relevant for your specific mission, it's time to look at the exact tactics you want to use to work your way through the discovery mission. And this, of course, somehow involves the idea of how long should this discovery run. And while I'm not a big fan of working with specific deadlines for product discovery activities, I believe in the power of time boxing discovery activities. Time boxing can act as a very helpful constraint for the creativity you want to focus on during the discovery. As a starting point, let's just set a 6-week time box for a product discovery, and let's look at how those activities and specific tactics might line up during such a fictional schedule. But why would it might make sense to limit your discovery activities to 6 weeks? Now, here are a couple of reasons why I believe this is a very good place to start your discovery schedule. First, lots of companies work on a quarterly basis. And whether you use OKR for your goal prioritization process or some other techniques, working through on a quarterly basis is very common. Imagining you start off your goal setting process on 1st of January. Even if you have decided on the right discovery priority to pursue, you might need some ramp-up time to actually get going, which kills a couple of weeks from this 12-week window of your discovery process during Q1. After all, you're probably doing discovery for execution in Q2, Q3 and the following quarters. Meaning you now only have 11 or 10 weeks left before you should arrive at an ideally validated solution to pursue in the next quarters. With those 6 weeks in mind, you then arrive at a point just during the midst of the quarter where you are much smarter about the potential, the hurdles and the struggles of pursuing this problem space or this discovery mission you align on. This is why 6 weeks is a good starting point. And I'm not saying discovery processes have to be completed within those 6 weeks, but I believe they are a great starting point for a team to schedule their specific activities and to iteratively decide whether it makes sense to invest more time in this product discovery or whether you have actually arrived at a feasible solution which is worth pursuing. But of course, even 6 weeks are a fairly short period of time. I wouldn't recommend scheduling all the discovery activities you might have to work through throughout those whole 6 weeks. Because even though the first couple of steps might be clear, it's pretty hard to imagine what exactly you need to do in the 6th week of a product discovery. You maybe have returned to the alignment step because you realize that you're pursuing the wrong mission, or you have to work through a lot of research sessions in order to truly uncover customer problems worth solving. What you should keep in mind when scheduling activities though is dependencies to other teams and the necessary lead time it might take to get those things going. A couple of examples. When you want to create cross-functional alignment, not just with your team, but also with other business units or maybe even the C-level, this probably takes some time to get a meeting into their diaries. Meaning you want to schedule an alignment session where you can work through a collaborative alignment framework as quickly as possible, because that should serve as the starting point for your discovery efforts. So start with those activities which have the longest lead time to actually get going. While we just talked about alignment and alignment meetings as one example of that, there are a couple of other examples you want to keep in mind. Even in the most mature companies, you have to deal with a lead time of 1 to 2 weeks in order to recruit users for qualitative interviews on site. Meaning you want to get those research sessions as quickly scheduled as possible to avoid having an unnecessary lead time in between sessions to test out iterations. So as soon as the problem space is roughly defined and aligned, reach out to your user research department and discuss with them how you can make a series of interview sessions happen. After all, you will probably find use for every interview session you have scheduled, but you will have a hard time bridging those unnecessary lead times if you forgot to schedule a session in advance. Another example are ideation sessions. I'm a big fan of running cross-functional ideation, not just within the product team which owns the discovery space, but also with other departments which might have a stake or at least some helpful advice for this product you're working on. Meaning it also takes some more lead time to get a session where other parts of the companies can come together and contribute to your ideation session. You want to make sure you schedule those things as early as possible as well. But make sure you have actionable evidence in place in order to frame those ideation sessions. So don't get ahead of yourself and schedule an ideation session for the first week of the discovery, because this way you would transition straight into the solution space without maybe even having collected first pieces of evidence which make the case for which problem you're searching solutions for. While the tactics I just mentioned have a long lead time, no matter how you're exactly going to set up the interview session or ideation, there are a couple of other tactics during product discovery whose lead time is significantly impacted by your choice. Let's look at another example. Let's imagine you have found an idea which is worth validating and you want to look at the holistic aspect of not just looking at it from a qualitative perspective, but validating it from a quantitative perspective. Examples for that might be an A/B test or a fake door test. Now, the beauty of quantitative experiments is that you get pretty much scientific answers whether an idea is worth pursuing or not. The downside, of course, is that this comes at a cost. You just simply need a certain threshold or amount of traffic in order to produce significant results. So, as soon as you realize that you want to run quantitative results, revisit your product discovery schedule and try to accommodate how long this experiment probably needs to run before you have significant results. and incorporate that into your decision-making process and stakeholder update during the product discovery. Just because you're on a 6-week time box doesn't mean that you only have to update and communicate your insights at the beginning and the very end of a product discovery. Instead, you want to make sure that there's a continuous process happening in terms of updating stakeholders, sharing your pieces of evidence with corresponding departments, and making sure everybody is aligned around the decisions you want or need to make along the way. Only through a continuous decision-making and stakeholder check-in process, you can make sure that the decision of whether a discovery mission has successfully been completed or needs to be continued is made along the way. You don't just want to stop with a product discovery after 6 weeks, surprising everyone with the fact that you probably need another quarter to truly understand this problem space and validate solutions. You want to be clear about the insights and the decisions you want to make as soon as possible and on a continuous basis. This is why adding something I like to call discovery check-ins to your discovery schedule is extremely vital. A discovery check-in is also something you need to accommodate in advance when putting it into the schedule, because most likely this involves some stakeholders or C-level management to make decisions. And you probably know how hard it is to find time in their schedules. So you want to schedule those discovery check-ins probably on a weekly or at least bi-weekly basis, getting together for 30 minutes, simply sharing the rough outline and the pieces of evidence you have collected during the last discovery sprint you worked through, and ask the questions you need in order to make decisions moving forward in case there's any uncertainty. Keeping all of that in mind should give you a pretty good starting point for setting up your individual product discovery structure and schedule. The most important thing for the schedule to remember is that you and your stakeholders shouldn't treat it as a promised plan, and neither as a linear instruction of how this product discovery will exactly play out. Treat it as what it is, a prediction for the next couple of steps you think you have to take in order to explore the problem space and the solution space. When setting up your product discovery schedule, you want to keep 3 main things in mind. First, don't start with the specific tactics. Instead, make sure that you plan for enough time to work through the problem space. Second, schedule those activities with the biggest lead time in advance and try to accommodate which ones you really need in order to make progress during your product discovery. And third, make sure to always communicate your progress as clear as possible by making use of product discovery check-ins to give an update to team members, stakeholders, and management alike. Here's one thing to keep in mind whenever you feel uncertain or maybe even afraid of approaching the next product discovery. Think of something which is called hindsight bias, meaning looking back, every set of actions looks like a perfectly structured plan. And this will probably be the same when you look back at a product discovery you have concluded or maybe even had to abort and look back at the schedule you worked through. It will never be that clear or structured when you look at it from the beginning. Instead, you will see a lot of blank space which needs to be filled, and that's okay. Take your time and trust in the process in order to approach this discovery mission step by step, but make use of something like a discovery schedule to give yourself and your team members the confidence you need to move forward. Cheers! If you found this video useful, make sure to leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel to not miss out on future videos. Make sure to tell me about your product discovery experiences and even share your discovery schedules if you like to do. If you're looking for more actionable content on how to deal with the challenges of being a product manager, make sure to follow me on social media and subscribe to my weekly newsletter.